Hi everybody, Natasha Butler, JCU marketing lecturer, and this is Marketing Matters BU1108, BU2108, and this is week 5, video 3, and we're discussing consumer and business behaviour. Now, in the first video, we discussed the consumer decision-making process. In the last video, we spoke about the level of involvement and the problem solving that's used depending on the type of purchase. Now, in this video, we're going to discuss some of the major influences on that buying decision-making process. So when we go through that decision-making process, we also need to consider the influences that can impact the consumer on their way to making that purchase. These are the situational, psychological, and social factors that influence consumer behaviour. Let's look first of all at those situational influences. So the situational influences result from circumstances, time, location that affect the consumer buying decision-making process. It includes those physical and social surrounds, the time and reason considerations, and other aspects such as the consumer's mood. They can influence a consumer's actions at any stage of the decision-making process. They can shorten, lengthen, or terminate that decision-making process as well. Situational influences can be divided into 5 categories: the physical surrounds, social surrounds, time dimension, physical reason, and the consumer momentary mood. So let's look at those in a bit more detail. The physical surrounds includes the actual location, the store atmosphere, the physical evidence of the store, such as the aromas, sounds, and lighting. It can also be impacted by the weather and other factors in the physical environment in which the decision process occurs. Companies try to make the physical factors in which consumers shop as favourable as possible. Examples might be the lighting and mirrors used in change rooms to make garments look more flattering, or the music and the lighting of the restaurant that might encourage diners to stay just that little bit longer to have an extra drink or to indulge in dessert. The social surrounds also impact the decision-making process, and that includes the characteristics and the interactions of other people, such as friends, relatives, salespeople, other customers, and passers-by who might be present when that purchase decision is being made. Because, think about it here. Who's had friends influence a purchase that may not have otherwise have been made if they weren't all together or if they weren't there with you? We also need to take into consideration too the time dimension and include the possible frequency of the product use. How often is it going to be used? The length of time required to use that actual product and the length of the overall product life. We also take into consideration the time of day, the day of the week or the month, the seasons, and the holidays of the purchases. We also consider the amount of time pressure a customer faces. If somebody's in a rush, then that's definitely going to impact their decision-making process compared to somebody who has a little bit more time. So let's consider, for example, purchasing a last-minute Christmas gift at 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve, or having a long day at work and grabbing takeaway food on the way home, or even perhaps being on holiday in a tropical location and we purchase a floral dress or a shirt that would not have otherwise have been considered. So that time dimension definitely has an impact on that decision-making process. We also need to consider the reason why we're making that purchase or why consumers are making that purchase. So what exactly do we want that purchase to accomplish, and who is it for? For example, is it a gift for somebody? Because that influences the decision-making process. Is there a special occasion that the consumer needs a new outfit for? Are they redecorating, or does something need replacing? We also need to consider here who else might be impacted by this decision. Is it just the consumer, or is it other people? Finally, when we're looking at the situational influences, we also need to consider the mood of the customer in that moment in time, because that can definitely affect a person's ability and desire to search for information, receive information, or seek and evaluate alternatives. So if that consumer is feeling really frustrated or suffering from decision fatigue or overwhelm, how's that going to impact the decision-making process? Are they on holidays and they're feeling relaxed and free? Or are they in a rush on their way home from a busy day at work? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they bored? Did they just have an argument with somebody? All of these things can impact the decision-making purchase. So we've just considered the situational influences that can impact the buying decision-making process. Let's now consider some of the psychological influences that can impact that. So the psychological influences are those influences that operate in part to determine people's general behaviour and thus influencing their behaviour as consumers. So the considerations that we're looking at here with the psychological influences is perception, motives, learning, attitudes, self-concept, and lifestyle. So let's look into all of those 6 in a little bit more detail. So firstly, perception. Perception is the process of selecting, organising, and interpreting information inputs into producing a meaning. So these information inputs are sensations received through the organs, such as our sight, taste, sound, and touch. And then we look to produce meaning based on what those sensations that we've received. So although we receive numerous pieces of information all at once, only a few actually reach into our awareness. How much of what I'm saying right now is actually reaching through to your awareness? So we select some inputs and ignore others because we do not have the ability to be conscious of all inputs at one time. Selective exposure is the process of selecting inputs to be exposed to our awareness while ignoring others. So an input is more likely to reach a person's awareness if it relates to an anticipated event. A person is likely to let an input reach their consciousness if the information helps satisfy current needs. The selective nature of perception also results in selective distortion and selective retention. So selective distortion is when an individual's changing or twisting of received information when it is inconsistent with that person's feelings or beliefs. Selective retention is remembering information inputs that support our personal feelings and beliefs, but forgets details or inputs that do not support those feelings or beliefs. The second step in our perceptual process is our perceptual organisation. And this is where we organise the information that does reach our awareness and we integrate that with new information with what is already known. Thirdly, is the individual's interpretation of the information inputs. And this is necessary to reduce any mental confusion. This is the assignment of meaning to what has been organised. So interpretation is usually based on what is expected or what is familiar. Moving right along. The next psychological influence on the purchase decision is motives. And a motive is an internal energizing force that directs a person's behavior towards satisfying needs or goals. A buyer's actions at any time are affected not just by one motive, but a set of motives, and some of those motives are stronger than others. These motives affect the direction and intensity of behavior, such as being thirsty, hungry, hot, cold, fear, or success, for example. The next step in the psychological factors on the decision, or psychological influences, on the decision-making process is learning. And this refers to changes in individuals' thought processes and behavior caused by information and experience. Sources of learning include behavioral consequences, information processing, and our own experiences. The learning process is strongly influenced by the consequences of an individual's behaviour. So behaviours with satisfying results tend to be repeated, whereas behaviours with negative results tend to be avoided. Inexperienced consumers use types of information that's different from experienced shoppers who are familiar with the product and the purchase situation. Consumers learn about the products directly by either experiencing them or indirectly through information from salespeople, friends, relatives, and advertisements. Moving along. We also need to take into consideration attitudes, and attitudes is an individual's enduring evaluation of feelings about and behavioural tendencies towards an object or an idea. Attitudes are learned through experience and interactions with other people. Attitudes remain generally stable, but they can be changed. An attitude consists of three major components: the cognitive, affective, and behavioural. Consumers' attitudes towards a company and its products strongly influence the success or failure of the organisation's marketing strategy. Marketers use several approaches to investigate consumer attitudes towards dimensions such as prices, packaging designs, brand names, advertisements, salespeople, repair services, store locations, features of existing or proposed products, and social responsibility activities. Changing people's negative behaviours is a long and expensive and difficult task, and it may require extensive promotional efforts to do so. So as businesses, we want to try to ensure that we maintain a positive attitude from consumers about our offer and about our brand. We also need to consider the self-concept, or the me, the perception of me, and the view that I have of myself, or the view that you have of yourself, because consumers choose products that reflect and enhance their self-concept. Consumers' self-concept may influence whether he or she chooses to consume a specific product or brand. We also need to consider lifestyles. So lifestyle is an individual's pattern of living expressed through the activities, interests, and their opinions. Patterns include the way people spend their time, the extent of interaction they have with others, and their general outlook on life and in living. People particularly determine their lifestyles, but lifestyles are also influenced by other factors, and lifestyles influence product needs. One of the most popular frameworks for exploring Australian lifestyles is a survey from Roy Morgan Research. And this research identifies 10 value segments that are briefly explained in table 5.3 of the textbook, or else you can view it online at roymorgan.com/products and tools/value segment. And this is a copy of the value segment that you'll see from the Roy Morgan website. So Roy Morgan is Australia's best known and longest established market research company. And they have an unparalleled reputation for reliable, accurate, meaningful, and revealing market research. So the Roy Morgan value segment is an innovative system of market segmentation that goes beyond demographics and psychographics, and this explores values, mindsets, and attitudes that motivate consumer behaviour. Because they're derived from Roy Morgan's single source, which is an atlas of truthful concrete networks, the value segment can be used to drill down even further with profiling people's leisure activities, their preferred brands, and the media that they consume. And it's well worth having a look at this website to get a bit of a better understanding around the value segments of the different segments of people in our community. So, oh my goodness, we have now looked at the situational influences. We've now looked at the social influences. We've looked at the psychological influences. Let's now finally look at the social influences that impact on the buying decision-making process. So, social influences are the forces that other people exert onto our consumer decisions. This can be influenced by a person's role, for example, their family. It could be their reference groups, opinion leaders, digital networks, cultures, and subcultures. And we're going to look into those a little bit further now. When it comes to roles, a role is a set of actions and activities that an individual in a particular position is supposed to perform based on a standard of societal expectations. And each individual has multiple roles. Consumer socialization is the process through which a person acquires the knowledge and skills to function as a consumer. So, as per the table, a person can be an initiator who first suggests or thinks of buying the product. But they could also be, but that could be all that they are. Somebody else may be the decider who makes the final decision on what to buy, or they could just be the user of the product. So, for example, a small child may initiate the purchase of a new toy. They might be influenced by something they've seen on TV. But the decider and the buyer may be a parent or somebody else, not the child. But the user of that product is a child. We also need to consider the family influences, because I'm sure that you've probably experienced this, but your family has a direct impact on your consumer decision making. So our family structures vary, and so do our family decision making processes. Different family members play different roles in the family decision-making process. The family life cycle affects individual and joint needs of the family members. We also need to consider reference groups, and reference groups is any group, it could be large or small, that positively or negatively affects a person's values, attitudes, or behaviors. So again, this could be families, it could be our friends, it could be church groups or professional groups, for example. They could also be an online group. And there are three major types of reference groups: memberships, aspirational, and disassociative. A membership reference group is one in which an individual actually belongs to. So the individual identifies with group members strongly enough to take on the values, attitudes, and behaviors of people in that group. An aspirational reference group is a group to which one aspires to belong to. One desires to be like those people in that group. Or else a group that a person does not want to be associated with is called a disassociative reference group. The individual does not want to take on the values, attitudes, and behaviors of those group members. A reference point is that individual's point of comparison and a source of information. How much reference group influences the purchasing decision depends on the individual's susceptibility to reference group influence and the strength of involvement within that group. Reference group influence may affect the product decision, the brand decision, or even both. And a marketer sometimes uses reference group influence in advertisements to promote the message that people in a specific group buy the product and that they're highly satisfied with it. In most reference group, one or two members stand out, and they're known as opinion leaders. So an opinion leader is a reference group member who provides information about a specific sphere that interests reference group participants. An opinion leader is in a position or has knowledge or expertise that makes him or her a credible source for information on one or more topics. The opinion leader is likely to be most influential when consumers have high product involvement but low product knowledge, or when they share the opinion leader's values and attitudes, and when the product details are numerous or complicated. Consumers also, of course, use our digital networks and different types of online platforms where we share personal profiles, blogs, pictures, etc. And part of that conversation is about consumption, where we share what products to buy, what products to use, the experiences that we've had, products that we dismiss, or those that we need to be aware of. So, as in the case in the offline world, online recommendations and suggestions from friends and family are a really powerful tool for marketers to recognize and engage with in an authentic manner. One established and trusted network sources of reviews and recommendations is Choice. However, many lesser known consumer advocate websites and even individuals are exerting a strong influence on consumers who use online for product reviews. And we need, as marketers, we need to be really aware of contrived or misguided suggestions, because that damages our brand, our product, and our organization in the long term. When we're looking at social influences too, we also need to take into consideration culture. And culture is the personality of a society, as shown in our cultural values, in our knowledge, our beliefs, our customs, our objects, and concepts that as a society we use to cope with the environments. So culture includes those tangible items such as food, clothing, furniture, buildings, and tools, and the intangible concepts such as language, education, welfare, laws, the values and range of behaviours accepted by society. The concepts and values and behaviours that make up a culture are learned and passed from one generation to the next. Cultural values affect the way that consumers choose and consume products, and culture affects the development, promotion, distribution, and the pricing of products. International marketers must take this into account when we're looking at expanding into overseas markets, because people in other regions of the world have different attitudes, values, and needs to what we may have here in our home country. So international marketers need to adapt to different methods of doing business and develop different types of marketing mixes. So within our culture, we also have subcultures, and this is a group of individuals whose characteristics, values, and behaviour patterns are similar, but also differ from the surrounding mainstream culture, as you can see in the images here on the screen. Subculture boundaries are usually based on geographic designations and demographic factors. However, tech is changing that, and subcultures of consumption are really evident now online. Our culture is marked by many different subcultures, and this has resulted in considerable variation in consumer buying behaviour. Subcultures hold differing values from the surrounding cultures, and I've just said all of that, haven't I? So for marketers, the implication for us is to build a brand, product, organization by generating that cultural following, such as like what Harley Davidson has done, where consumers socialize together and in the creative act in consuming the Harley Davidson brand. So we've just looked at the many factors that influence the decision-making process. Whew, and there's a lot, isn't there? But it's really important for us as marketers to be aware of that, but also really, really aware on who our target market is, so that we can address each of those influences along the decision-making process for our customers. So we've now looked at all of those influences, looking at the consumer decision-making process. In the next and final video, we're going to be discussing the decision-making process for B2B or business-to-business purchasing. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.